why do we want what we want? There are two solutions. Either we think we want something based on our own inner preferences, our own inner egos, or our own inner values, so to speak. Or we want something, like we want an object, because of the object's intrinsic worth. And of course, technically a third option when there's a combination of both two options. Now, René Girard's Mimetic Theory argues that we don't want something because of those mentioned three options or two options, but we rather want something because another person wants it too. But wait, I thought I am an independent thinking human being. Let's have a look at the Mimetic Theory and what implication it can have for all of our lives. But before we do that, let's have a short look at what are desires or wants. We can distinguish between needs and desires, or in other words, needs and wants. Needs are basically our biological makeup, those things what we really need to survive. Let it be food, shelter, water, and those things. And when those needs are fulfilled, we still have some continuous wanting, right? We still desire some things. And exactly those things are our desires or wants. While needs are grounded in biology, wants are influenced strongly by other people who model desires. Hence, we imitate and adopt their desires. Mimetic. This brings us now to the Mimetic Theory by René Girard. The Mimetic Theory says, at its core, we desire what other people desire. Girard postulates that human desire is not based on the spontaneity of the subject's desire, but rather the desires that surround the subject. He argues that humans do not themselves know what to desire. As a result, they imitate the desires of others. Looking now more closely at the Mimetic Theory, we have here the subject. Like normally we think that the subject, like in most cases we, desire an object based on our subject's inner will, right? Because we make an inner decision which is based on our own preferences or values or something like that. Or, right, as I also said before, that we desire that object because of the object's intrinsic worth. So it's like a one-way relationship with two parts. Now, with René Girard and his Mimetic Theory, he introduces another part, the model. So it's basically like a triangular. Like, it's not so important like which is now the geometric form here, but now we can just imagine it as a triangular. We see the model, here's the subject, and here's the object. For the subject, the model conveys desirability on the object. I want the object because the model wants it. Let's have a look at a story to better understand this theory. There's a story in the Old Testament where two women claim to be the mother of a child, one being the real mother, the other lying. They brought their case in front of the King Solomon, who had to judge the case. We have the subject here, the lying woman, who wants to be like the honest woman, who is here the real mother, and also the model. The child in this case is the object. One woman wants to be the other woman. In order to do so, she wants what the other has, namely the child. What we can see here, the lying woman wants the object, the child, only because possessing it means being more like the model, the real mother. The object itself, like here this child, is not an end in itself. It's all about the desire to be. The desire from the lying woman to be more like the honest woman. Introducing here another key sentence. All desire is a desire for being. In Mimetic Theory, Girard sees that behind desires for success, wealth, status, pleasure, relationships, goodness, even love, is a longing for being. A longing to be more than what one currently is. It makes somehow so much sense because often we desire to be another person, or for sure many of us desire to be more than we currently are. We see that perfectly in advertisements where we see the object, but it's not about the object's desirability. It's more about to be more like the model or like the job model who uses that object. We want to be more like that model. Let be it like more beautiful, more rich, or whatever attributes this model has. We want to be more like that. So we want to be more than we currently are. Back to the story of King Solomon. Solomon threatens to divide the child. The honest mother gives the child up because for her the child or the object is an end in itself. The lying mother doesn't care. And it makes sense because it's not about the object, right, for the lying mother. It's more about being like the honest mother. The object is just a means to an end in this case. Solomon gives the child back to his real mother, the one who protected it by wanting to giving it up. Going now one step deeper, Mimetic Theory is generally a theory of human behavior, and this involves a theory of conflict. In this conflict we can perfectly see, or like imagine also, when we have here the subject and here's a model, and both desire that object. Of course, when this is like a scarce object, just as one individual child, of course it can come to competition or to rivalry. If the appropriative gesture of an individual named A is rooted in the imitation of an individual named B, It means that A and B must reach together for one and the same object. They become rivals for that object. If the tendency to imitate appropriation is present on both sides, imitative rivalry must tend to become reciprocal. It must be subject to the back and forth reinforcement, what communication theorists call a positive feedback. In other words, the individual who first acts as a model will experience an increase in his own appropriative urge when he finds himself thwarted by his imitator, and reciprocally. Each becomes the imitator of his own model. Each tries to push aside the obstacle that the other places in his path. Violence is generated by this process. Or rather, violence is the process itself when two or more partners try to prevent one another from appropriating the object they all desire through physical or other means. That means that the subject and the model, they become the resistance to each other. And the more they resist each other, the more they think by overcoming the other person, the problem will be solved. And in this whole process of escalating this rivalry between subject and the model, the object is totally forgotten. It was in the beginning maybe about the object, right? That both want to, the subject and the model want to get this object, but over time the object is forgotten and it's just about the rivalry between the subject and the model. Now, how can this look in our lives? Think of two best friends. The one is deeply in love and praises his beloved one all the time in the presence of the best friend. It can now happen, thanks to the praise, that the best friend starts to desire that person too. Why? Most likely to be like the model, deeply in love. It seems that the beloved person, in this case the object, might give it, because it gives it already to the model. If the best friend now starts to desire, the model notices it and desires even more, because both try to go for the same object. Through this, rivalry is created. Keep in mind, for all good things in your life, the following words. If it is dangerous to make a friend acquainted with the perfections of one's beloved, because he also may find her charming and desirable, no less is the reverse danger, that he may perplex us by his dissent. This sounds that mimetic desire is something bad and that it always leads to violence. But this is not true. Mimetic desire is first of all not always leading to violence, like it can lead to violence in many cases, or to rivalry or competition, but it doesn't have to. It can also have many positive effects. Not every instance of mimetic behavior, however, results necessarily in conflict. As long as desire is directed at an object that can be shared, learning a language, reading a book, listening to a piece of music, etc., mimesis poses no problems. As soon as the object of desire can no longer be shared, as with objects of sexual desire, social positions, and the like, mimetic desire generates competition, rivalry, and conflict. Now you might say you want to be more like Elon Musk, you want to imitate Elon Musk, and you feel no rivalry whatsoever. The same goes for me when I want to be more like Aristotle, for example. I also feel no rivalry to him, or I have no rivalry to him, only inspiration and aspirations to be more like him. And yes, this is the case. Rivalry mostly exists when the person we want to imitate or we desire the same what this person desires is in our space. Like is close to us. The closer the person is to us, the more likely rivalry can begin. And this brings us now to the topics of external and internal mediation, and also to the general topic of why equality in our modern days fires up extremely the surge of rivalry between us people. First, let's look at external mediation. And external mediation is the case when we have here the subject, this is we, and we desire to be like the model. We want to imitate the model. This is like Elon Musk or Aristotle. And when those two circles or those two spheres are like divided, right? When there's like a big distance between those two. Like Aristotle is, for example, dead, right? There's like a big distance in time, for example. And Elon Musk is also probably far away from most people. So this is also like a big distance. This is like external mediation, when the subject and the model circles are like far from each other. They might be separated from us by time because dead, space because they live in a different country or aren't on social media, or social status, a billionaire, rock star, or member of a privileged class. In the state of external mediation, we can shout out our desires. We can talk about it, right? Because this is even something like inspirational, something like we aspire to be someone else in a positive sense, and they're so far away from us that we can't even develop envy or something like that, right? Because they're just far away. In my case, for example, Aristotle would be dead. Like, I don't want to imitate Aristotle, it's just an example, yeah. But now imagine that we are the roommates, or like you or me, we are the roommates from Elon Musk. In this case, Elon Musk is super close to us. In this case, we move to the area of internal mediation when the subject circle and the model circles are pretty close to each other, or even like they are in the similar circle. In this case, like rivalry can easily begin. And in this case, in internal mediation, we hide our desires. Of course, we hide them because when we are envious, we don't want to shout out that we are envious on this person, right? So in this case, we hide it and we go into some often secretly rivalry, at least in the beginning. It can, of course, always become an open rivalry. And now, what's interesting in today's world, we moved extremely rapidly from external mediation to internal mediation. And why is that? Because of equality. If the modern emotions flourished, it is not because envious natures and jealous temperaments have unfortunately and mysteriously increased in number, but because internal mediation triumphs in a universe where the differences between men are gradually erased. Imagine being a teacher 500 years ago. In this time, the man, it was most likely a man, just compared to other middle-class men of his own, similar social status. And he compared to them. 200 years ago, other men, thanks to economic equality, joined the market or the job market of being a teacher. So now there would be more competition because there were many more men. Then also some years after that, women become more equal to men. So they also joined the job market of being teachers, right? So 50% increase in where you could compare yourself to as a teacher. Now, nowadays, social media comes also into the game, so to speak, right? So you can literally compare yourself globally with all teachers there, or with all people there, because you compete, so to speak, not just with teachers, other teachers. You can compare yourself with everyone. Now, I don't know how strong this effect from social media is, how much it moves the external mediation and internal mediation, to internal mediation closer. I'm not so sure about this. I'm thinking this is not so strong. Other people argue again that it's pretty strong, that the social media is a crazy amplifier to move more from external mediation to internal mediation. But for sure it has some kinds of effects. Girard's insight into the potential for conflict that accompanies internal mediation can help us better understand our modern, increasingly egalitarian world. As the metaphysical distance between desiring subject and model diminishes, the component of internal mediation, the potential for rivalry and violence increases. The more negligible the distance becomes, the more probable it is that mimesis will end in rivalry and violence. Nowadays it feels that we compete with everyone. Since everyone is more or less equal, of course there are still some dividing factors, in many cases money or social status, but they are becoming increasingly not existing, right? It feels like that we are can compare with everyone through social media, or also in our own social circles we can compare with everyone. So we find ourselves now in a world where we don't have so much more external mediation, but mostly we are living in internal mediation. When all the privileges of birth and fortune are abolished, when all professions are accessible to all, and a man's own energies may place him at the top of any one of them, an easy and unbounded career seems open to his ambition, and he will readily persuade himself that he is born to no common destinies. But this is an erroneous notion, which is corrected by daily experience. The same equality that allows every citizen to conceive these lofty hopes renders all the citizens less able to realize them. It circumscribes their powers on every side, which it gives freer scope to their desires. They have swept away the privileges of some of their fellow creatures which stood in their way, but they have opened the door to universal competition. With all of that, I don't want to suggest that equality is bad, and I don't know what Girards now want to suggest or not suggest, but I think equality is morally good. Just it has also some side effects, what are not talked about, exactly that we move more from external mediation to internal mediation, which is, I think, a pretty interesting point. With the help of mimetic theory, we can explain human behavior, because desire is at the bottom of our human behavior, right? And this theory somehow explains, in most cases, our desire, which is, in my opinion, pretty amazing. So we can reflect or use this theory on ourselves, we can use it on other people, and try to demystify those situations where it's about desire and rivalry and competition. I think this is pretty interesting. In the description below, I put many, many sources about René Girard, and also easy sources to start with him in order to grasp more of this fantastic, I would say, theory. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I wish you a fantastic day.